Welcome to the Lazy Fluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Mayumi.
And the topic of the day is honesty. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review on whatever platform you are listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, honesty. We had an episode about tatemae and honne a while ago, or I guess your true feelings or your versus what you actually end up saying. But this is not really a focus on that at all. And this is more talking about the general idea of honesty, specifically with a focus on how Japanese people, I believe, tend to be viewed as very honest. I'm not saying they're not inherently, but I'm more interested at exploring different facets of honesty on a group level and individual level. Because personally speaking, I don't believe Japanese people are honest in the way that people think of honesty, at least from the West. Do you have any, I think I'm the one kind of leading this conversation, but do you have any idea of where I'm going with this?
さっきのここの回でのhonesty の定義はどういう感じなの？
So honesty from my perspective is sticking with your actual or true intent, or having an alignment between what you are, your action, and how you feel about what you're doing. So if like I say, like this is the tatemae honne example, there is a bit of honesty, which is if I think your dress makes you look fat, then I will communicate that to you as honesty. But actions could be like, I opened the door for you or for somebody else, and I do that not because I'm expecting it. Maybe I do that as a sign of good faith because I'm a friend or something, and not just to manipulate you to make you think I'm being nice so that I can take advantage of you or something. That might have been a weird way to frame it, but basically an alignment between your intent and your action is how I define honesty.
難しいな、なんか。
Yeah. So the first example I have are group behavior, because this is something that's happened before. This is like very famous examples of like people doing wallet drops in Tokyo or Japan, and I mentioned them before, and people get all of the wallets returned with all the money in them. And as we mentioned, this was one of our first episodes. I think we talked about me losing a wallet in Tokyo and it getting all returned. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe people return wallets out of a sense of like justice, or why do you think Japanese people tend to return wallets?
まあジャスティスでもあったり、まあ私がそういうことをやるときは、後で自分のなんていうの、良心いい心ねに傷がつく。絶対どっかしらで後悔するから、そういうなんていうの、悪いことをしたときにね。だから正義っていうのもあるし、自分のためでもあるっていうのも言えると思う。
Do you think that other people feel the same way you do about why you do it, or why you would want to do it?
いやみんながどう考えてるかわかんないけど、とりあえず私はそうかな。
Okay, so with this example, what I will say, and I'll go into other examples about how I kind of view Japanese honesty. I kind of see it more as and I'll go into why I see it this way, but I'll just lay how I kind of view Japanese honesty as less about doing something because of a core set of principles that value being truthful, or seeing being honest to yourself as something that's potentially beneficial to you and others, and more as a way to prevent yourself from liability or reduce risk. So for example, I think I have asked this question to some of my friends before, and there some of the videos that do these wallet drops, they ask the people, they stop them and ask why they picked up the wallet. And from my sense, there's also an idea, if you walk beside a wallet that is dropped and you don't pick it up in a crowd, and people see you not pick it up and return it to the sender, that looks bad on you. And not only does that look bad on you, if there's nobody, imagine you are near a wallet and there's a police officer near the wallet and there's nobody else there. Before you've even picked it up, if you don't return it, or if you did pick it up and you were seen, that could be terrible for you and your family indirectly. Therefore, the least amount of risk you can incur is actually from picking up the wallet and returning it, because it's the expected behavior. And so I kind of view Japanese honesty as just a form of risk aversion, stemming from the fact that as Japanese people tell me many times, that the whole culture stemmed from small communities where people would get excommunicated if they broke from the norms or expectations of people in the group. Does this ring any sense of true to you?
まあ要するに今言ってくれたのはみんながやってるからそれに従わないとまあ一つのグループの一人ではなくなっちゃうからみんながするようにするっていうことで合ってる？
Well, on top of that, doing anything else could incur risk in many different ways. Like it could make you culpable for the crime. You could be suspected of being a dishonest person, or not dishonest person, but a person who is suspicious. And that word specifically, suspicious, which we'll get into, that's used a lot or fushinsha. You see that word a lot in Japan, I've noticed.
まあそれも理由の一つではあると思う。
Yeah, and so the other examples I have written here, I mean, I'll go through them, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because I noticed when been going around Tokyo, and even in like rural Japan, although there's this perception that Japan is very safe and people are very trusting of each other and they would never steal from each other and whatever, at least from the American perspective, there's a crazy amount of warning signs, don't commit crime signs, and I mean for very small stuff, like for the train stations, it's don't run, dash into the trains. In like rural Japan, there's like people will put like food in these little cartons like outside, or these little huts kind of for you to pay, like you to put 100 yen in, and then you can just take the food. And there's nobody watching them, but then they have these signs being like, just to reinforce that, be like, do not put 1 yen here instead of 100 yen and take it. And I noticed there's all these types of signs. I think I wrote on some other ones, like obviously in the train, you constantly get told, don't talk, turn off your phone if you're in a priority seating location, don't steal. It's all like we went to Don Quixote, and everywhere in Don Quixote, it's don't steal, you're being watched. If you steal, you could get, there's a maximum of up to 10 years in prison, which I think is crazy for committing what's called like petty.
窃盗罪かな?
Yeah, petty theft in a store, I'm guessing, which I think is insane. Like up to 10 years is crazy. Or also don't bother others and all this stuff like that. So all these kind of things made me pop this idea into my head, or maybe reinforce the idea to me that it's not saying be a good person, it's saying avoid punishment.
まあ逆にアメリカだとどういうサインになるの？もしこれと同じ意味を持っているサインが、まあ、スーパーであったり道でまあ、社会に溢れてるとしたらっていうかいつも見るサインはどういう感じなの？
Well, the reason I noticed it was I don't actually notice. Obviously, we have laws and whatever that enforce that, but I've never, for example, the whole thing saying like don't steal. The only time I can think of anything like that is instead of being told not to steal, you'll have like if you go to like a big box store like Walmart, they might have their items in a glass container to prevent you from accessing them. But I've never seen as many, like they have signs on so you know how there's a stair, and a stair has a flat surface, an incline, and a flat surface. They have like posting and signs and printing on just that little incline flat surface, so that while you're walking up, if you're looking down, you can also read, it says like mirarete imasu, as in you're being watched, which is crazy, like everywhere. And the like I'm not sure if they're directly the ceiling, but yeah, I don't have any sense of it being like that all over the place in America. And this is to say, Americans are not trusting of other Americans. So I don't think it's like, oh, we trust each other, so we don't have this here. I feel like it's this emphasis that you are, I mean, and I don't want to use other examples here that are over exaggerated, but the thing when I was talking with Amy earlier about this is a lot of these things that they're talking about are not significant to the extent that I feel like all these signs are warranted. For example, people talk about bike theft in Japan being really bad, but the thing to consider is everybody still, even in Tokyo, does not lock their bike. I think
No. You don't あれだよ、多分ジョイが気づいてないだけで、ちゃんとロックしてある、なんかちっちゃいけど、こういうなんかでかくて鍵って感じの、遠くから見たら鍵って感じのじゃないけど、サドルの下らへんに、のタイヤのところに、そういうちっちゃい鍵がついてるの。
No, okay, so this is why I'm clarifying between American locks and your version of saying it's locked. If your bike is not locked, and I mean locked to there's a whole thing I learned as a common biker. You don't just lock one part of your bike, you lock multiple parts of your bike, and you lock your front wheel and your frame together. In Japan, what Aimi is saying is that they can basically lock it, put a small lock so you can't move the actual pedal, but you can still pick up and pull the entire bike off.
そうでもそんなことしたらさ、みんなから見られるじゃん。だからそういうことを昼間に堂々とやる人はいないから、まあ夜だったら可能かもしれないけどね。ただ持ち上げて、車につるみ込むとかなんとかすれば盗めるけど。
Yeah, no, and I'm saying that kind of theft is actually very common in America.
Yeah.
My bike, at least when I borrowed it, I've had my bike indirectly stolen because I've never had my bike stolen when I'm taking care of it and making sure it's properly locked. But I borrowed my bike twice and got it stolen, even in a rural town in America. And I've had friends in college who had their bike stolen like 3 times within a term and never got it back and they were just dropping off for a class and they had it double locked with U-bar, like these huge bike, and somebody literally got a grinded through both of his bikes while he was in class and stole the bike on a college campus. So when I say that they don't have their locks in Tokyo, I mean they functionally don't, not in a way that would be relevant in America is my point.
そうね、後ろのタイヤだけが使えなくなるような鍵だから、例えば後ろのタイヤだけ持ち上げて、前のタイヤで転がすことは全然できる。
And also, I would say that there are also plenty of people who don't lock their bikes. I don't think that like every one of them has, like I've walked by some of the bikes. I didn't see anything even on the frame or the wheel. Or maybe this is too much of a conversation about bikes. But my point is, there is this perspective that this theft is terrible and is rampant. But I feel like in Japan, it's anything that is from the norm. Like even if it's a very small percentage, gets blown up to be like, we need to stomp this. This cannot be a thing. Like, what was it? People running and rushing into the trains. I was asking you about, they have signs about that. It's like, don't do that. And even when I was in Tokyo and, I'm saying rush hour, or when I was studied abroad for months, the most you get is somebody runs down the stairs and then stops and then walks into the line. And so I'm wondering how many instances of this that need to occur before it becomes to get the big of a response that actually happens, where you get signs in the train station, on the bottom of the train station, outside the train station, saying about people sprinting in the train carts and how it's a huge problem. But I mean, do you have any more thoughts? I have other places I want to talk about, but any more thoughts about bikes and trains in terms of honesty?
でもよくあるのは痴漢するな、見られてるみたいなのポスターはよくあるよ。
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring up because this was a thought I had, and I would like to look up more data before I make the take that I'm making. But my thing is, there are millions of people riding trains per day in Japan, and they're all pressed up against each other. And I'm not saying that the instances of like the train molestation or whatever shouldn't be attempted to be prevented. But my impression of it as when I studied abroad is it was one of the things that was constantly talked about inside our pamphlet that we were given. It's constantly everywhere that you see. I hear it online. I've seen interviews and stuff about it. But I know that some people say that, oh yeah, it's common to hear somebody who's had some instance of it. So I'm not trying to minimize the issue. But what I saw is given the sheer amount of people that ride trains and the fact that from people I've talked to, or at least, which includes women as well, just to be clear, I've heard many times saying, oh no, I've never had any problem with that, but I also see it a lot. It makes me wonder, I'm not saying it's not a big problem. I'm just saying the response that is given for anything that is outside the norm for Japan seems to be very Like they notice something that is off, and then it's like full scale. We will throw signs everywhere. We will make sure that people know they're being watched and that they don't engage in this behavior again. And well, I'm not, like I said, like the only reason I was hesitant to bring that up is I've not looked into how much train molestation is happening or whatever. What I would say is I assume if America had that type of density that Japan does with the trains, we would have a much worse problem.
電車がそんなコモンじゃないじゃん。
Yeah, no, exactly. But I'm saying I feel like if given the opportunity in America with that amount of train density, I feel like we would have theft would be rampant. Like anytime you're anyway, your pockets, you probably couldn't wear pants with pockets. They just yeah. Anyways, not to talk too much about that, but another aspect is punctuality. And I feel like you actually were the one who gave me this the idea where you had a friend that you always said, I mean maybe this is one friend, it could be multiple, but you're like, this friend's always late.
まあそうね。よく10分前とか5分前行動はしようっていうのがまあ常識っていうか普通なんだよ。例えば友達とか約束した時にまあ例えばね12時に集合しようってなったらだいたいまあ11時50分とか11時55分にはつけるようにとか、あと遅れた時のために電車に1本遅れてもいいような時間帯の電車を使うとかね、それも考えながらやるのが普通なんだけど、まあ多分アメリカ人はよく毎日っていうか毎回遅れるんでしょ？
I mean, it's more common. But I mean, the only reason the only brought it up is not because I'm saying, oh, Japanese people are late or anything like that. My only point was opening up as a discussion between the difference between a Japanese person in a group, in like a group setting where they could be potentially judged, and Japanese people when they're with friends or a smaller group setting and they don't feel they're judged. They could be judged for their actions as much. And this is what tying this back to honesty. I have some things here just because I want to make sure I can cover them, but these are some examples of where I feel like honesty can be judged or at least measured. So messaging, like messaging or texting your friends, I'll explain it in a second. Dating, cheating in general, and holding promises are things I have written down. And for example, with messaging, one example, you're talking about your friend being late to an appointment or something like this. Do you think this would happen if there was a meeting with a group of people outside of your direct relationship? Do you think that she's generally punctual, or do you think it's just a thing with you, if that makes any sense?
In general だと思うよ。
So even if it was like a class, like they had
いやクラスとかはまあ遅れないけど、なんていうの、正直言ったらクラスは重要じゃん。その遅れたら遅刻になるとかね、遅刻のなんかそのでまあ成績に影響するとかあるからさあれだけど、まあ、ただのハンギングアウトだったら別に関係ないから。
Yeah, obviously I don't think being late is depending on the person and the intent is a direct sign of being dishonest. I'm just using that as a very small example to move into other examples. For example, ghosting, which I know is super common, where somebody will stop communicating with you just out of the blank and never respond to you again. I feel like is another great example of something that normally would look bad, or the equivalent of something like that would look imagine like if you're in a group setting and you're responsible for a project and you committed something bad, or there was a miscommunication. Imagine if the project leader just never said anything and was just quiet. You know what I'm saying? Like they're like, hey, president, or like, you know, the prime minister, whatever. He commits a fraud, and then he's just like, and they're like, can we get a response? And he goes, and just goes quiet. But like, you know what I'm saying? I would never imagine that. You know what I'm saying? On this scale, or for even a group project, like you're in a relationship, a group relationship with somebody, in the sense that you're working on a project together, and somebody commits an issue that caused the whole problem to go astray. I would never imagine somebody to just ghost every member of their thing because they have consequences that come upon them for doing that. And you're like, yeah, that's obvious, but that's kind of what I'm talking about, honesty and how I perceive honesty in the context of Japan. Or I think another one is cheating, where cheating a lot of times the only people that are directly affected are the person you're cheating on. And so as long as they don't know, you see it as a no risk engagement. You know what I'm saying?
それこそ両親が痛むんじゃない？
Yeah, but they don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times, like with cheating.
これもなんかね、なんか確か哲学かなんかでね、やったんだけど、エクストラカリキュラーで、なんか相手が浮気しているっていうのを知らないで浮気するのはいいことか悪いことかみたいな。なんだっけな、ちょっと違うけど、まあ、知ってないで浮気するのは、あれなのかな。
Yeah. I'm basically just asking if I'm trying to put a focus on how I believe in individual cases, in the cases where they're less likely to be perceived or affected by a larger group that they are a community in. I feel like Japanese people are more likely to go astray from behaviors that people think they would normally take. So they say, oh, Japanese people are punctual. They're less likely to do so. They're not held to or viewed by some group or evaluated. You think, well, just Japanese people are honest. Well, probably if you're in like one-on-one relationship, you're texting with them. I believe that's less likely to be the case. And I'm not saying this isn't with Americans. I'm just trying to make an example of how I exacerbate how I believe this notion of honesty is actually occurring in Japan. If it's dating or cheating, I feel like a Japanese person would never treat their place of work as a lot of way people treat their relationships. Like, you know, somebody's doing, I don't know, like giving trade secrets to another company while working at like Toyota or something. And they'd be like, oh, well, it's fine because Toyota doesn't know that I'm giving away trade secrets. So they're not hurt. I don't think a Japanese person would ever do that because they realize the consequences of losing the job is huge. But for an individual relationship, I feel like, oh, it's only me and them. So I'm only hurting them at worst. And I feel like that makes Japanese people way more likely to be like, okay, well, I don't need to be honest. Do you have any thoughts on this? That's kind of how I kind of view this.
今要するに日本人はそのグループを一つの単位としたときはその結果を想定してそれが正しくないことが嫌だからしないけど個人になるとまた違うってこと。
Yeah, exactly. I actually have it lined up, and I don't believe this. Like there are exceptions to everything, and I am aware of that, and I'm not trying to overly generalize here. But I kind of have it as an American. There's, and I'm not saying we don't have problems with divorce, all that. Just to make it clear, Americans have a bunch of problems with divorce and other things you'd call dishonesty or whatever. But I at least believe the idea that honesty and your actions are based off of a core set of beliefs and principles, as opposed to where I believe that actions are made out of a fear of punishment, lack of risk, or habit. I think that's more common where the Japanese version of honesty stems from. It doesn't come because, I mean, the way you responded is how I would imagine an American responding to why would you pick up a wallet, which is, you know what I'm saying? I like doing actions that make me feel good. If I did something that made me feel bad, it would likely contribute to like negatively impact me in the future or something like that. But I don't think that is the archetypical response for why a Japanese person is honest in a given situation. I believe like the more honest response is something like when I talk to a lot of people, they say, well, Japan is an island nation. We lived in a village. If I did something like this, my family could be affected. I could be affected. And it doesn't stem from any sort of core set of principles. I think we kind of talked about a little this with the like Budo and way back in the day.
今さ気づいたけどさ、よくサインで見られてますっていうサインはさ、それにちょっと関係してない？みんなに見られてるから変なことするなよみたいな感じじゃん。
Yeah, that's what I was trying to point with those signs. Yeah, because that was like reinforcing this idea. I was like, why do I need to read on the stairs? Like I'm not trusted at all. And it's not that I'm not trusted as a foreigner. These are all in Japanese. So these are to the Japanese people. These signs are being directed, or at least to people who can read Japanese, which the majority of Japanese people, with eyes. And it says, yeah. And I'm like, am I not a customer? What is going on here? I feel like I was already like a criminal before I did anything.
まあ個人に訴えるならそういうことをして 後で後悔しますよとかいうサインだったら、まあ個人のねにまあドカーンってくると思う。見られてますよっていうのは、まあなんかみんなから見られてるから変なことしないようにっていう警告、まあ脅しみたいな感じで。
No, totally. Oh no, what was the other one that you pointed out? You said, oh, it was on the streets of Ikebukuro. They were just blasting a like siren, a police siren every now and then, and it said, what is it? If you obstruct any pedestrian traffic, you will be charged, or something like that in Japanese. Do you remember when I was what was the actual phrasing of that? Was something yamete? I can't remember if that rings any bells for you.
あれか。みんなに、違う。通行の迷惑となるので、客引き行為は、やめなさい、みたいな。
絶対やめなさい. Yeah, or something like that. And it was just playing over and over again. But yeah, basically, don't try to bring people. There are a lot of different situations where people on the street either try to bring somebody or lure somebody into a store to then rip them off or steal their money or something like that. It's not a lot, but like I said, and any amount, I believe, ends up being interpreted as a lot from the perspective of Japan. So it is a thing that has happened, and therefore constantly from like the morning to the end, I just hear this thing playing with police sirens. It was this intimidating, well, at least sort of intimidating Japanese police officer just saying, we will stop you. You will do not do this. And I'm like, for a country that I believe, maybe from the perspective of Americans, seems so like, oh, there's no crime, there's no this, there's no that. Everybody must be just getting along. It's super homogeneous. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, it's super homogeneous. They must trust each other. I don't feel that trust at all. I feel like, but people act in a way that assume that you'd think that there was. Like I said, with this is something I did like, and my dad, who's fairly old, talked about how in America this used to be a thing. More is where people would put their food out, like on a little carton or something outside, and just have a bucket of like a coin glass jar or something, or metal jar, and just put the prices of the food below, and then you take the food and pay what you need to do and then leave, and you don't have cameras, you don't have anything, whatever, and it makes it really straightforward. But he's like, now you can't really do that because everybody, not only do they not trust you, but then suddenly now they might sue you if they like take your food and like they get sick or something like that. And so they had this in Japan, I said, but at the same time, one of them had a camera and it said, hey, you better not put 1 yen in this glass jar instead of 100 yen. And I thought that was so funny because if somebody wanted to steal it, they could just wear a mask and steal the whole thing and put nothing. So to me, it seemed like a weird, redundant threat.
確かにね。まあ一つそういうことをしてる人がいるからそういうことしたらバレますよっていうの脅しっていうかまあ警告が一つと、あとちょっと思ったのがさ、あんまりルールわかんない人いるんじゃない？
Don't steal.
違うなんだよ違うのこういう売り方のシステムをあんまり理解してない人いいんじゃない？物が置いてあって、まあお金の入れるその缶みたいなのがあって、まあどこにお金入れればいいか分かんない人とか。
It said 100 yen. I think it's an adoshi. There was a camera too, and it said like, what was it? The live camera, whatever we're watching. I definitely felt like it was a threat of some sort, which is so weird in rural Japan, where you expect everybody's really nice and caring and whatever. Which, in my experience, like rural Japan, they tend to be a lot nicer. But I'm saying you still end up with these instances where it's like, hey, we're cool. I totally trust you, but know that if you ever cross me, I will kill you and all your family. That's kind of how trust feels like it comes here. But yeah, anyways, yeah. Let us know. Are we way off base? How do you interpret trust where you're from? Maybe if you're an American as well. Do you believe my interpretation of how Americans view honesty is honest, or do you believe it's actually more similar to Japan's or anything like that?
Hello, we're back.
戻りました。
Yes, so in this section, we're going to talk about our experiences in our life.
で、今回。
So we're going to talk about yesterday, actually. So yesterday, we went to Ikebukuro to do some stuff for the main channel.
インタビュー。
Yeah.
でも何のインタビューかについて、まあ、それは今話さないんだけど、とりあえず撮影したかった。
Yeah. So So we tried to interview people and put the sign that we wanted to interview. And sit in a cold weather, which was like 6度ぐらい、Celsius.
で、歌詞だと多分40度かな
I don't know.
わかんない。
Yeah, it was pretty cold yesterday. Yeah, and then wind, it was windy, so yeah, we were just having, hard time wanting people, to interview.
いや、もうそれが、なんていうか、その昨日と一昨日動画の撮影やろうとしたんだけど、なんか完全に失敗してしまった。多分2時間総じて4時間ぐらい待ってたんだけど、その一人の人は、インタビューしたくなかった。で、なぜこの話をしてるかというと、そのアメリカではそういうなんか、ストリートインタビューとか結構有名だと思う。流行ってるというか。でも日本でもそういうようなものがあると思うんだけど、みんなが多分他のアメリカ人だと、こういうようなストリートインタビューは、ただカメラを用意したら、みんながなんかインタビューされたいと思ってるかもしれませんが、本当はそうでは全然違う。少なくとも日本の場合では、多分何万人が私の前のなんかその表札を見て、インタビューやってるのを気づいて、でも完全にその後無視して、なんていうか、自分がなぜ、なんていうか、そのインタビューに参加しなかったです。
So I asked my sister if she wanted to do the interview, and she said no. And I asked why, and she said she didn't want to get interviewed because YouTube videos are like permanent. Yeah, so that's why she didn't want to do.
でもなんか普通のアメリカのインタビューの動画を思うと、無料でやるのが定番だと思う。そのなんか表札があって、それで私と話してくださいとか、What's it called? Change my mind とかそういうような動画があるんだけど、私の場合だとなんか1000円を差し上げますとか言ってあった。
So we even offered, like it was like at
first, まずはクッキー、スタバのクッキーを差し上げます。で、それからスターバックスの飲み物を差し上げます。インタビューしたら。で、500円差し上げます。で、1000円差し上げます。で、何万人が歩いて表札見てたんだけど、誰もインタビューに参加したくなかった。
Well, it wasn't like 何万人 though. It was probably, I don't know, thousands? I don't know. Hundreds?
Well, $10.
People.
No, it was definitely 何万だと思う。その総じてその4時間ぐらいその前の
今回。No. I guess it was like up to thousands.
そんなことないと思う。
Really?
なんか本当になんかその想像してください。みんなが歩いてる姿。で、その一つの列だけだと多分10人。で、毎回多分30秒が、その10人が、なんていうか、100人、200人、300人、本当に多分2万人だと思う。それ以上。
Not sure. But yeah, anyway, so, but like definitely people were watching our stand and watching us, but just read the sign and then passed away. So.
で、私がこのこの動画絶対にやるけど、今の時点でちょっとがっかりしてる。なんか、何でしたっけ？なんか来週にこの動画アップロードしたかったんだけど、動画完全にないので、何か撮影した動画ないので、後でやらなくちゃいけないと思う。
Maybe a
もう一度。
parody.
他のこの失敗した動画今までの撮った動画を使って他の動画を作れる可能性があるんだけど、一応私がやりたかった動画今作れないので、それを残念に思う。でもこれをなんか経験を持って、なんかアメリカだとその500円とか1000円、100円でも例えば私が見ていた何でしたっけ、言語学習に関する if you can speak a language that I don't, I'll give you $5 or $1 とか結構見たことある。見たことあるの、まあ有名、アメリカだと。で、お金をあげるならみんな参加したくなる。
Definitely people are not poor in Japan. Maybe.
そう、それを思った。みんな経済的にそんなに貧乏じゃないから、その1000円とか500円、まあ100円はそんなに気にならないということに気づいた。
Yeah, I don't know that's the case, but like we offered basically 1000 yen for 15-minute interview, right? So that will be like 4000 yen per hour.Yeah, which is like in Japan for arubaito, part-time job, you just can get 1000 yen per hour, so which is a really good deal, yeah, for the 俺のね、money. So.
で、他の私が思ったことは、アメリカではこういうアメリカンドリーム聞いたことある？
Yep.
まあこういう概念だと、誰でもが誰でもになれるってこと。
誰もが何に
なる、何できる、何でも可能
なれる。
そう。貧乏ならお金持ちの人になれるとか。で、そういう、まあ、それが現実に合ってるかどうかは別の話なんだけど、この経験に関しては、多分アメリカだと、TikTok とか YouTube は結構有名だから、お金なしで、まあ逆にお金を差し上げたい人がたくさんいると思う。そういうカメラがあると、例えば、二人の人が私の、スタンドの、自分だけの、携帯を持って動画を撮ったんだけど、まあ一人の人は日本人かどうかわからないんだけど、二人、何でしたっけ、2回目の人は絶対に日本人ではなかった。多分アメリカ人だと思った。で、そういう人は私の表札見て、携帯を撮って写真とか動画を撮ったと思う。私の前。
Yeah. So there was an American guy, who took a video of us doing the promotion.
で、私が言ってたのは、これは今までは多分5人のアメリカ人が私のサインを見てきたと思うんだけど、その1人がずっと見ていて、あいみに言わなかったんだけど、この人じゃなくて、他の人が、2人私が見てたアメリカ人が見て、何とどういうことを言った。で、他の2人は動画とか写真を撮った。それ何でしたっけ5分の 4? 4分の5、5分の4の人がこの動画に興味があった。多分日本語を読めたら参加したくなっちゃったかな。
We should have written in English.
まあとりあえず言いたいことは、アメリカではそういう何でしたっけ、お金持ちじゃなくて有名になりたいというドリームが強いだと思う。でも日本に関してはそれはあまりそういうような大きな夢がないと思う。ほとんど会社に入れるだけで満足できる。
It's a typical Asian dream. Like we want to be stable, steady, and average. That's why that's our notion.
でもまあとりあえずどうやって多分他のところに行かなくちゃいけない。渋谷とか秋葉原に関してはそういうような。
To get more like to get younger people and energetic people.
でもとりあえずそういうような日本の YouTube のインタビューの動画を見てる人、覚えてはいけないことは、忘れてはいけないことは、覚えてはいけないじゃなくて忘れてはいけないことは、そのインタビューされてる人はすごく確率的に統計的に小さいパーセント珍しい人物、そのインタビューしたい参加したい人はマジででそれ忘れないでください。このインタビューではこの日本人がこういうことを言ったからみんなの日本人はみんなの人は同じように思うとかそういうことは多分ない。で もちろん前のセクションに戻ると何かを言ったらそのインタビュー日本人が何ていうか 発言したら、それは自分の本当の気持ちじゃない可能性もある。例えば、あいみの姉、お姉さんに関しては、そういう、なんていうか、動画に参加したら、オンラインの投稿が嫌だから、参加したくない。で、まあ、参加したら、多分、自分があまり、何でしたっけ、人を炎上するようなことを言いたくないかもしれない。なんていうか。
いやいやいや。
うん。で、まあ、それを覚えておいてください。And we're back with the final section.
はい、そういうことは
And if you made it to the final section, that means you should leave a comment, question, or otherwise at lazyfluency at gmail.com. Like as I said, yeah, language related or otherwise. And we might respond to it in the next episode. In this episode, we will be responding to 2 comments on surrounding our World War II episode last week. And we'll read the first one now. I bridged the comments as always, just for sake of brevity. The first one's from a new commenter. Yay! Sheep thief. So, in my opinion, history explains a lot about your surroundings and why things are the way they are. If Japanese students aren't taught about World War II, how will they understand their position in the world? How will they understand and fix Japan's problems? Are old people more versed in history, or are they even more unaware? I feel like eventually World War II will be reduced to the World War II Jidai, just another period abstracted from the current reality of Japan. Do Japanese people ever think about how things would be different if they had won the war? Do Japanese people know about American firebombing during the war, which killed more people than the atomic bombs and destroyed many beautiful Japanese cities? Do they know about the Japanese massacres of Chinese people, the enslavement of Filipinos and Koreans? If it's true that most Japanese people really know nothing about all of this, I think Japan needs to fix this situation. And then a follow-up comment from Oddity about this as well. I only got the chance to taste communist education in kindergarten. By the time I went to school, the wall had fallen, but nuking Japan was mentioned as early as then. The general sentiment was, America's a big meanie and it dropped a really scary bomb on Japan and killed lots of cute Japanese children. But the USSR is good and it freed us from the Nazis, even though Bulgaria was part of the Axis powers. In Israel, World War II is taught extensively in high school from every possible angle, with a huge emphasis on the Holocaust. Japan, however, is nothing but a footnote. The war ends with the US entering Berlin, and then the narrative goes something like, oh yeah, and the US had this other front with Japan, and it was a real buzzkill in the post-war celebrations. So then they dropped the A-bomb because they had to test it sometime, and why not Japan? The end. Jokes aside, the way World War II seems to be reduced to dry factoids in Japanese education is both fascinating and weird, given the impact it had, particularly on Japan. But even more fascinating is the reason behind this apparent suppression of history in the collective memory. What is your take on that? Why do you think it's like that? There are a lot of questions in there with all of these, but I feel like a better way to approach them, as Amy will discuss, is why is history taught the way it is taught? And that's kind of the question we'll answer, and we'll also see if we can directly answer a lot of those small questions.
まあ多分なんかそう、前回のエピソードを聞いてない人は、日本ではあんまり日本が歴史上昔にやった恐ろしいことっていうのをあまり深くは教えないんだよ。でそれがなぜかっていうことで、私なんか結構なんかそれっぽい回答を知恵袋でなんていうの？
It's like Yahoo Answers.
そうでなんか見つけたんだけど、なんか先生が回答してくれてるやつで、なんか一つ目が受験に出ないっていうやつで、二つ目が時間がないで、三つ目が世間からの無言の圧力っていうのがあるんだけど、一つ目の受験に出ないっていうのは多分その政府が出してるなんていうんだろう、教育でこういうことを教えてくださいっていう、ガイドラインみたいなのがあるのかな。でそこに、あんま書いてないから受験に出ないとかもあるんじゃないっていうのが考えたので、あと時間がないっていうのもそうね、なんか受験とかでさ、他のパートがさより出るのに、そのなんだろう、より近代史っていうの、modern history。
Yeah, modern history。
そう近代史に重点を置いてたら他のところが追いつかないから、他のところをメインにやって近代史はあんまりやらないっていうのが、その受験に多分影響してるんだと。
Yeah, so from the teacher's perspective, basically, or a teacher's perspective, they aren't given the time to, and also doesn't show up on any of the entrance exams, which is basically like what most education is structured around, is entrance exams. But then that brings the other question, which is more fundamental, which is a little harder to answer. I mean, you can have suspicions as to why, but why isn't it on the entrance exams? Did you have any ideas about that, or?
まあ日本はだって隠したいんじゃない？自分っていうかかつての日本が、ね、どういうことをしたのか、どういう恐ろしいことをしたのかをあんまりね、教えるのがちょっと嫌なんじゃない？
Well, I think a way to analyze maybe what the perspective of the government is on this situation is to look at how they have handled, at least what Sheep Thief directly commented about some of the other atrocities committed by Japan. And generally, there tends to be a rule of they acknowledge to some extent that they did something wrong. And in the case of, I believe, the the situation with Korea, and I'm blanking on there's a specific term for the comfort women, which is, I think, there was, from what I remember, there was like a small acknowledgement once by Abe, but it was like underplayed, and it wasn't considered to be sufficient. And like at most they will vaguely acknowledge that they did something, and then after that it's all about moving on, basically, and not talking about it at all. And so, given that, from my perspective, that has been the traditional response of how the government handles its modern history, I would not be very surprised if the reason that they don't have it in any part of the curriculum is because they don't want to focus anything on it in the first place.
そのさ、
comfort women.
それ学校でやった覚えない。ニュースでその問題のなんとか周年っていうか、なんていうの、70年目ですとか、そういうのはニュースで見たけど学校では習わなかったわ。
Yeah, and just so I should add, because this was another question asked by Sheep Thief, do older people know more about history? Well, yeah, I guess it depends what you're talking about. But I do believe older people, on average, have a more of a skew to be more conservative, and all of Japan's government is primarily concerned of more conservative people who also tend to be on average, more nationalistic. So although I don't believe many, like now youth Japanese people would think much of like anything in terms of Japan being criticized in their history, I think the people who make the rules, the conservative old people, do not want the youth to look at Japan critically in the first place. And that's my personal just perspective on it. And so that's why they don't put emphasis on things that might make Japan bad in modern history. So I guess Japanese people, older people, have a more of a chance of knowing more about at least World War II, but they're going to have a very, on average, more conservative, like Japan-centric view, similar to America. Americans do have that, but obviously I do believe we learn more about World War II from both sides than Japan does about either side of the conflict, in my personal opinion. And as for the fire bombings, do they talk about fire bombings? Did you learn about fire bombings? Like not just the nuke, like other stuff surrounding World War II? No.
Nope.
No. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'll say that you might have forgotten as well. I do believe I brought it up last episode, though, about how, from the American perspective, there's a big emphasis on talking about fire bombs and how the U.S. Firebombed Japan very heavily, and it killed a bunch of people, and the justification for why they had to bomb them was because, well, this actually leads to less deaths than our continuous firebombing, which has not been effective because they don't surrender. And so that's kind of and because that is crucial to the justification of the nukes, firebombing is something that is kind of reiterated a lot of times in like the American education of World War II. Let me see some other questions about, I think they need to fix the situation. I think probably it'll naturally get fixed over time as like the Japan gets more. You have to think Japan had a very drastic change from World War II to post World War II and the occupation of America. And the vast majority of the people running the government are extremely old. And it could get worse because, like I said, less babies, you have more percentage of the population is really old and conservative. But generally speaking, Japan has been trending more and more, I'd say like 5 to 10 years late of whatever sorts of progression happened in the US. That's kind of what it feels like. With pretty much everything, with entertainment, whether it be YouTube. YouTube's finally starting to catch on in Japan, and then like it's caught on in like 2007 in like the US, or I guess like, and then got caught on a lot in like 2012. And I feel like gay rights or other something that's been slowly getting more and more traction. What was it? I'm trying to think of some other issues. Obviously, Japan is starting to get more and more welcoming to foreigners. I would not be surprised if they start immigrating more foreigners. And I feel like the more youth, whether or not we'll get more youth in Japan, we'll see whatever happens with the whole birth issue. But the more youth you have, I don't believe the youth is as interested in keeping up the grudges or perceptions that of the war and history that the older generation is. The problem, though, is that a lot of the youth, like I said, is very apathetic. They have absolutely no interest either way. So, and it's not that they hate whatever Korea or China or whatever, although they might have their own opinions from like passed down through culturally. It's more that they literally just don't have any interest. If it's not related to the entrance exams, and then they don't care. And if it is related to entrance exams, they only care about it to the extent that's relevant on the entrance exams. And then after the point of the entrance exams, they have forgotten it. Yep. And so, let me see. What is the apparent reason behind the suppression in the collective memory? Okay, so that's my opinion. As I don't think there's a want necessarily for suppression, or most Japanese people think that they are being suppressed. Like Japan doesn't take the anti-propaganda. So like notably Russia, like especially now with the conflict in Ukraine, or anytime they get conflict, or even America does this, and Japan did it during war. They'll do propaganda. So they're not just saying that something didn't happen or not acknowledging it. They're actively boasting another tale and saying, no, America's great, America did this or whatever, or Russia's great, Russia did this. In Japan, it seems like when Japan realizes it's wrong, they just put their head down, sort of. Yeah. Unless there's anything else you want to add. Then hopefully we answered that question. I want to make sure I just didn't miss anything because I don't want to make it seem like I'm not trying to address anything. Filipinos, Korean, massacres of the Chinese people. Is that taught? The Nanjing massacre?
Nanking 事件わかんない。やったけど、なんていうの、こういうことが起こりました。何年に起こりました。日本はかつてこういうことをしました。だけどちょっと浅はかな感じ。
Okay, but I mean, it was still covered. That's interesting. I was reading.
それは知ってるからやったってことだよね。
I did a book translation for part of my senior thesis in college, and that was written, or from the perspective of the author at the time when he was writing it. It was before the 2000s, and there was discussion about, and I had to look in very deep about the massacre and how it's been handled traditionally. And sometimes it is admitted or denied from the Japanese government's perspective as happening. But if it's in education now, or at least in your education, it seems that there's at least an acknowledgement that something happened. I'm not sure what the details. Do you remember any of the details?
覚えてないです。
Okay.
もはやこれ小学校の受験の時やったから。中学受験のためね、小学生の時。
Okay, I think we covered all the questions. Also, quick note about Jidai. Jidai, although initially a little arbitrary on when they started and ended, now they kind of fall. A new Jidai occurs when there's a new imperial like change, or like an emperor dies, right? That's how like Jidai change, or like or the position of emperor is passed on outside like a family lineage or something like that. So I doubt there will ever be a World War II Jidai. They don't even want to. They barely want to acknowledge it. I doubt they would make it a whole. Yeah. But thanks for the comments. That bell means we reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and or just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey,
Miami.
signing off. じゃあねー。